Popular cartoon that previously criticized the government will stop publication. Chief Executive John Lee continues official visit to Chongqing. Foreign Minister Qin Gang meets French counterpart. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Cartoons by a popular artist that have been condemned by senior officials as being unfair to the government will stop being published after 40 years. Hong Kong newspaper Ming Pao will stop publishing satirical cartoons by Zunzi starting Sunday without giving an explanation. Sharon Tang reports.
The cartoon in question is still on Ming Pao today. The only difference is what's being announced on top of the comic. Ming Pao's editorial department wrote, Zunzi's cartoon will stop running from Sunday, and the paper would like to thank Zunzi for witnessing history for 40 years along with us. A while ago, cartoonist Wong Kei-kwan said this to the Associated Press.
I've been working as a cartoonist for about 40 years, and I've covered most of the incidents in Hong Kong from Tiananmen Square incidents until now. So there were a lot of things happening in Hong Kong, and then I used my cartoon as a record to have recorded all that has happened in the history.
Going by the pen name Zunzi, his satirical cartoons often target politics. Before the city's handover to Chinese rule in 1997, he once told TVB News that he's not worried about being told to stop what he's been doing. Wong told TVB News only Ming Pao would know the actual details and reasons behind the halt to the cartoon series. Wong added he's still in Hong Kong and has no intention of leaving. His comics came under scrutiny from government officials between October and May. Just 2 days ago, the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau criticized Zunzi's cartoon that day, which was on the District Council revamp, saying it insulted patients with heart disease and cholesterol problems. Last month, this Zunzi comic about the police's $5.2 billion communication systems also came under fire. At the time, Secretary for Security Chris Tang said the comic made misleading allegations against the government over and over again. Tang added criticism is fine, but allegations that aims to incite public resentment against the government is not. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Opinions across the city are divided over the issue. Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs Alice Mock said while the government accepts different opinions, it must clarify the facts about allegations that are untrue. The Ming Pao Staff Association said the newspaper's decision is regrettable. It noted a columnist's work is also among the core values of the newspaper. The association said society needs to be just and kind. Senior counsel Ronnie Tong, who is an executive committee member, said when deciding if contents constitute the offense of incitement, it depends on motivation and other factors. Hong Kong Journalists Association said the incident reflects just how intolerant the government is towards criticism, adding officials should stop attacking the media. Meantime, Chief Executive John Lee continued his Chongqing trip today. Lee and his delegation first visited the Jingfen Laboratory located in Western Science City. A scientific expert said Chongqing has gradually progressed from a heavy industrial center to a techno-science one. Mimo Sengai reports.
On the second day of his Chongqing trip, Chief Executive John Lee led the delegation to the Jingfen Laboratory, located in Western Science City. The research facility started operations in the middle of last year, positioning itself to be the national lab and committed to develop new diagnostic technology for major diseases. Currently, about 20 research teams are stationed on the site. This medical technology company representative told the CE about his effort in promoting internal exchanges. In response, Li encouraged academics to contribute more to technological research and development in Chongqing and Hong Kong, saying both places can benefit from such exchanges. The CE then visited the BGI Spatial Transcriptomics Center on the lab site. The scientist who works at the center said the city has a huge potential for the development of stomics, a method that allows scientists to measure all gene activity in a tissue sample and find where the activity is happening. In the afternoon, the delegation went to the International Logistics Hub at the Inland China Exhibition Center before enjoying some local cultural performances, including the famous Sichuan opera, Bian Lian. Memusanai, TVB News.
The Environmental Protection Department has approved an environmental assessment report on developing parts of the Fanling Golf Course for housing purposes under certain conditions. Timothy Lee reports.
In 3 months' time, the lease for 32 hectares of the Fanling Golf Course will end. Authorities have eyed at least 9 hectares of its grassland for the construction of 12,000 new housing units, but they will first have to get permission from the Environmental Protection Department. After the government failed to get a stamp of approval for its environmental impact assessment by the EPD last year, their updated report was accepted by the environmental body on Wednesday, albeit under certain conditions. Those conditions include the Civil Engineering and Development Department reviewing its layout plan to preserve 0.4 hectares of woodland at the site. The EPD also required authorities to limit its activities that will affect the local landscape and nature. A spokesperson for the Libre Research Community, an NGO focusing on land development policies, said the Environment Department's conditions will barely hinder the construction process. He believes the government can lower the density of the land development to maintain the quality of life for future residents. Meanwhile, some lawmakers expressed concern that authorities are placing their attention to the construction of housing units instead of using available resources to solve the local traffic problem. The Hong Kong Golf Club, which rejects the land development project, noted it will continue to seek legal advice for a judicial review. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Housing Authority announced a slight improvement in average public housing waiting times. The figures show the latest quarter show it has gone from 5.5 years to 5.3 years. The authority said the improvement from the start of 2023 to March is due to the large number of public housing units available for allocation. There were about 133,200 general public housing and 97,100 non-elderly one-person applications under the quota and point system by the end of March. The funeral of Abby Choi, the victim in the horrific murder and dismemberment case in Tai Po, will be held on the 18th of next month. Sources say Choi's family retrieved her body at the end of last month, including her head and legs. The funeral, which will be conducted in a Buddhist ceremony, is scheduled for the 18th of June at Tai Wai's Po Fook Memorial Hall. Choi's remains will then be cremated at the Po Lin Monastery on Lantau Island the next day. The services will not be open to the public. Overseas, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Qin Gang has met his French counterpart, Catherine Colonna, in Paris. Qin stressed the need for relations with Europe to be free from outside influence. He arrived in France after a visit to Germany, whose government later approved a bid by Chinese company Costco to take a minority stake in the operator of a Hamburg container terminal. Nazvi Karim has more.
During his tour of Europe, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Qin Gang has had to navigate his way through complex geopolitical issues. After meeting German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock in Berlin on Tuesday, Qin flew to Paris for talks with French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna. During the meeting with Colonna, he said Beijing has always called for China-European relations to flourish on its own merits and not be subject to the influence of any third party. This as China exerts greater global influence, with Beijing playing a role in easing tensions in the Middle East, forging economic bonds with BRICS countries, and trying to veer away from the US dollar in international trade. Colonna said France does not engage in bloc confrontation. Appearing to acknowledge Beijing's growing clout, she called on China to use its influence with Russian President Vladimir Putin to push for peace in the war with Ukraine. In February, China put forward a 12-point plan to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Qin said Beijing remains committed to promoting a political solution. He earlier said China had no intention of benefiting from the war by supplying Russia with weapons. Both parties agreed on the need to develop an economic relationship that is both stronger and more balanced, building on April's Beijing meeting between President Xi Jinping and French President Emmanuel Macron. Qin wants both sides to enhance people-to-people exchanges in fields such as sports, education, language, science, innovation and tourism. Meanwhile, soon after Qin left Beijing, Germany approved a move by China's COSCO Shipping to take a significant minority stake in the operator of a container terminal in Hamburg port. There were initial concerns that the larger stake would pose a security threat. As such, COSCO would not hold more than 24.99% of the Tollerort terminal of logistics company HHLA. About 30% of goods handled by Hamburg port involve Chinese products. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Coming up, U.S. Congressman pleads not guilty to over a dozen crimes. Move to support Hong Kong's talent pool in genetics and medicine. China's latest space mission is on the right track. Welcome back. The United States government will begin denying asylum to migrants arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border without first applying online or seeking protection in a country they pass through. The new rule announced Wednesday is part of new measures to crack down on illegal border crossings while creating new legal pathways to lawful entry. Matthew Bray reports.
Here in Matamoros, a town on the border with Texas on the Gulf of Mexico, migrants wade or partly swim across a river in an attempt to get into America. But at points where some people sought easy access, National Guard troops were laying down concertina razor wire, sending people back to the Mexican side. They are inhuman, said this woman. We can't go in, it's closed. The US has introduced a regulation that sees most migrants as ineligible for asylum if they pass through another country. It also coincides with COVID restrictions known as Title 24 ending. Under that rule, many migrants were expelled to Mexico without a chance to seek asylum. As the restrictions expire, migrants crossing illegally will not be allowed to return for 5 years. The upshot is that many migrants have been amassing in Mexico at various parts of the border, unsure about how or when to cross. At Tijuana on the Pacific coast, migrants were waiting in a no-man's land for processing between a primary wall and a secondary wall dividing San Diego and the Mexican side. Some law enforcement officers are not happy with Biden ending Title 24.
It is my opinion our government has failed its people. It has failed its people for decades now because the insecurity of our border is not is a federal responsibility, but it has become a local problem.
Currently, 27,000 are in U.S. Customs and Border Protection custody. They have been ordered to release migrants in any border sector that has reached 125% of holding capacity, with instructions to report to an immigration office within 60 days. Other measures from the Biden White House include allowing 30,000 people a month from Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua and Venezuela to enter if they have a financial sponsor and enter through an airport. 1,000 can enter daily from Mexico if they secure an appointment via an app. There is also a plan to open 100 regional migration hubs across the Western Hemisphere. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
New York Republican Congressman George Santos has pleaded not guilty after being charged with committing 13 crimes. This report from NBC News.
Moments after pleading not guilty to 13 criminal charges, George Santos was on the federal courthouse steps in a crush of reporters, defiant as ever.
I'm going to fight the witch hunt. I'm going to take care of clearing my name, and I look forward to doing that.
The indictment accuses the freshman congressman of wire fraud, money laundering, stealing public funds, and lying to Congress about his finances. Federal prosecutors say Santos devised and executed a scheme to defraud supporters of his candidacy, telling donors their money would be used for things like campaign ads, but instead paying off personal debts and buying clothes. Congressman, did you take campaign donations and use that money to buy expensive suits?
No, I did not.
The government also accuses Santos of collecting tens of thousands of dollars in unemployment money from the state of New York during the pandemic, all the while making a salary of $120,000 in Florida.
This is inaccurate information, and I will get to clear my name on this during the pandemic. It wasn't very clear. I don't understand where the government's getting their information, but I will present my facts.
In the 2022 midterms, Santos became the first openly gay Republican elected to Congress. But almost immediately after being sworn in, it was revealed that he had made up details about his education and work history. Santos eventually admitting he never graduated from college or worked for Wall Street firms Goldman Sachs and Citigroup.
Well, I've been a terrible liar on those subjects. And
he said his mother survived 9/11.
I'm a son of two immigrants. I am the grandchild of Holocaust survivors and the son of a 9/11 survivor.
But immigration records show she hasn't been in the country since 1999. The federal government's case focused on accusations that he lied about money and campaign financing as well. Tonight, despite calls from his Republican colleagues in New York to resign,
his conduct has been embarrassing and disgraceful.
Santos says he is staying.
We'll go through his time of trial and we'll find out how the outcome is.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy pointing to other members of Congress who have faced criminal charges and kept their seats until court cases played out.
I have to go back and vote tomorrow.
That means George Santos is going back to Washington.
Australia's Trade Minister Don Farrell arrived in Beijing today as Canberra pursues its bid to remove trade barriers and stabilize diplomatic ties. Farrell is expected to meet Commerce Minister Wang Wentao as he is likely to call for the full resumption of unimpeded Australian exports to China for all sectors. China is Australia's largest trading partner with two-way trade in goods worth $195 billion in 2022. Trade curbs were imposed on some Australian goods in 2020, and Canberra barred Chinese company Huawei from its 5G network over security concerns. Diplomatic tensions have since eased. Back locally, the study of genetic information has played a key role in treating patients suffering from hereditary diseases. In a bid to increase and nurture talent in the study of genetics, the Hong Kong Genome Institute and Hong Kong Academy of Medicine have joined hands to launch a research grant. Timothy Lee reports.
Hereditary diseases like cancer and neurological illnesses have long plagued the world. But genomic medicine, a discipline which incorporates the study of genetics into clinical care, has offered revolutionary treatments. And Hong Kong is now redoubling its efforts to boost research in this field. The Hong Kong Genome Institute was established by the government and started operations in 2021. It has now teamed up with the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine to launch the Research Excellence Grants in Genomic Medicine. Both bodies hope the grants will help attract genome research talent to the city, as well as fuel the local talent pool. The Institute's Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Lo Su-vi, said authorities have backed their organization because of the lack of Chinese data currently available.
The reason why the government has invested 1.2 billion into Hong Kong Genome Institute is precisely that the World Genome Database, 80% of that consists of the information from the white population. And Asian only accounts for a very small percentage, so meaning even less for Southern Chinese and even less for Hong Kong people. And in order to develop and advance genomic medicine, it is very important for us to build up this genomic database.
To become eligible for the grant, candidates must be hired specialist trainees or young fellows of the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine. This entails 6 years of medical education in local universities, 1 year of internship at a hospital, and at least 2 years of basic specialist training. The grant will offer $250,000 and access to special resources and advanced lab equipment.
This genome sequencer has the capability of sequencing 48 genomes in 24 hours, and this state-of-the-art apparatus will be available to awardees of the grant. The Hong Kong Genome Institute said the first list of awardees will be announced by the end of the year. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
After the Tianju 6 spacecraft successfully launched from the Wenchang launch site last night, the craft has now docked with the Tiangong space station. David Garrett reports.
4、3、2、1，点火！
At 9:21 p.m. on Wednesday on Hainan Island, Tianju 6 blasts off heading for the Tiangong space station. The mission to deliver supplies to the taikonauts. The unmanned robotic freighter is taking clothes, water and food to the 3 Shenzhou 15 crew. These shots from a drone 350 meters above the ground give a different perspective as Tianju 6 leaves the Earth. The spacecraft was atop a Long March 7 rocket. After several minutes, Tianju 6 separated from the carrier and entered its designated orbit. The craft is carrying enough supplies to last the crew for 7 months. The solar panels of the cargo craft unfolded and began working. This camera on board shows the separation close up. The engineering team applaud a successful launch. And around 8 hours later, 5:16 a.m. Thursday morning to be precise, precision was key as Tianju 6 began docking with the Tiangong space station. There was tension in the control room. 425 kilometers above Earth, these two structures inch closer until they come together. The Manned Space Agency confirmed the connection was successful. Now the crew members will transfer the supplies. The trio are due to return to Earth later this month. David Garrett, TVB News.
That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.